Hello and welcome. You're watching News Center and I'm Parikshit Luthra. The fate of US President Donald Trump's tariffs announced on April 2nd, 2025 may be decided by the Supreme Court on Friday. The court has not indicated which decisions are ready for release, but it merely stated that rulings in argued cases may be issued when the justices take the bench. The expectation is that the legality of tariffs may be taken up. During the arguments on November 5th, several justices signaled doubts about the legal basis for the tariffs under a 1977 emergency powers law. Meanwhile, India continues to face 50% tariffs from the US as negotiations for a trade deal continue. President Donald Trump said that Prime Minister Modi is unhappy with him because of the high tariffs. Speaking at a House GOP members' retreat, Trump also claimed that India has substantially reduced its oil purchases from Russia. Earlier, Trump said that Prime Minister Modi wanted to make him happy and was aware that the US could raise tariffs quickly. According to data from Kepler and other reports, India's Russian oil imports fell to a three-year low of around 1.2 million barrels per day in December, a 40% drop from the June peak of nearly 2 million barrels per day. In the absence of a trade deal, Indian exporters are bearing the brunt of tariffs. A Bloomberg report warns that exporters risk losing US orders for the crucial summer shopping season if no deal is reached by January. The tariffs have already hurt order volumes during Christmas and New Year, forcing many exporters to cut production. All right, let me go across to the Director General of Federation of Indian Exporters, Ajay Sahai, who is with us right now. Mr. Sahai, could you give us a sense of how the exporters who had somehow been able to absorb the impact of tariffs, how will they fare now, considering we don't have a deal, and if we don't have a deal by January end, what would happen?
No, you are right, because in some of the fashion-led sector, particularly in apparel and footwear, normally the order for the next season should have been finalized. By looking into the good rapport with the Indian exporter has with the US buyer, they have deferred the decision. They are expecting India to have a deal by the end of January. If that happens, probably those orders can be executed by the Indian company, and still be a challenging time. We are also feeling our hope that some intervention is made by the Supreme Court of the US, and if the tariffs can be struck down, that can also provide relief to the Indian industry.
Right. Do you see a substantial impact on certain sectors? What about footwear? What about leather? What about textiles? Are we set to lose volumes, export volumes to US in this quarter?
That will happen because in the tariffs so far, the global companies have not been able to shift their supply chain because they have a high social compliance. But now, since the deal is not there, if that is not happening by January, probably they will be moving to the other destination. And the challenge is when they move to the other destination, bringing them when the PTA is in place will be quite a challenging task for the Indian exporters.
Right. So you expect US companies to start moving to other destinations if we don't have a deal by January end?
That is the feedback which the industry has given to us. In some of the segment where the orders are not seasonal in nature, probably that may not happen. But in respect of footwear and apparel, where the orders are seasonal in nature, this is likely to happen.
Right. Let me go across to Mr. Dua as well. Mr. Dua, we're looking at a difficult situation, all eyes on Friday. But even if the court strikes down Donald Trump's tariff strategy, saying that it has not been endorsed by any US law, it is unconstitutional, can Donald Trump and the White House still find a way to give legal effect to those tariffs?
Thank you for having me in this discussion. The only way possible at that point of time would be for them to appeal to a higher court and bring out more forcefully that the tariffs have been levied for the security of the United States, an argument which probably, if they lose, would mean that they were not able to convince the first trial court. Otherwise, I don't see any other reason, merely because they've had a trade deficit with India or with many other countries, that the United States president can trample over the Congress's powers, the parliamentary powers, and call out everything which he does, as we are finding, that he calls it a security necessity. This argument may not really cut ties either in the first court or even in the appellate court. That's my anticipation.
Right. Let me go across to Deep Pal. Deep, how do you see the situation here onwards? Do you see any kind of reprieve for India, or even if the reprieve comes by way of the Supreme Court order, is it going to be temporary?
Right. I think we need to consider a couple of things there, Parikshit. First of all, thank you for having me. So the first thing is, in the way things are operating right now, if you notice that there has been quite a bit of focus both on the part of the government as well as exporters in India to try and diversify, right? In the last month, we have heard about two trade deals, one with Oman and the other with New Zealand. The Commerce Minister, as we speak, is in EU trying to tie up the EU FTA that has been negotiations on which have been going on for a while. And we are also in conversation with a number of other countries across the globe, including Mexico and elsewhere as well. So I think every time that we hear President Trump talk about tariffs on India, or the possibility of higher tariffs on India, or questions about India buying Russian oil and so on and so forth, I think that just reinforces the need for India to diversify across its export basket across the globe. Now, of course, America is a huge market, and there is no easy way, as every country that sells its goods and services to America has found out. There is no easy way, obviously, to find an alternative, right? So that notwithstanding, I think moving forward, what we will see happening, what we are seeing happening already, is an attempt to find other markets where India can sell its goods and services. Now, while that is happening, we also need to remember that while on the trade front, things haven't been very good going for the last year or so, there are other areas where India continues to have a cooperative relationship with the United States, whether that is on defense collaboration, on technology, and so on and so forth, through the Trust Initiative. So that will continue, and there is this hope, or there is this attempt to ensure that the benefits of cooperation on various other aspects do accrue as far as trade is concerned. So that will obviously be something that India will continue to hope. But at the same time, I think, as the other speakers have also mentioned, there will be an attempt to tie up a trade deal at the earliest possible. There will obviously be also expectation that if the 25% tariffs that have the additional 25% of tariffs which have to do with purchase of Russian oil, if they can be gotten rid of, which is something that the Indian government has been talking about, has been trying to for quite a while. We have noticed that RIL has recently come out with a statement saying that they have not been buying Russian oil for the last 2 weeks of December, and they don't intend to buy any for the rest of this month. So there will be an attempt to try and see if these 25% of the tariffs can be removed, and that would obviously bring some amount of respite to Indian exporters, and then take it from there.
Right. Mr. Sahai, you've been in so many meetings with the government. Is there any kind of clarity on whether this 25% oil tariff will go away, considering we've substantially reduced purchases of Russian oil?
Definitely, if you look into the data, our import from Russia is going down. On the contrary, our imports from US is improving. So we are definitely giving a very clear signal, and I don't think any of the private sector industry or even the Indian bank will try to buy Russian oil from a sanctioned entity and see this to sanctioned entity account for major flow of oil to India. It is likely to come down. But whether that satisfies the US government or not is also a $1 million question.
Right. The other question, Mr. Dua, that I'd like to ask you, look at the kind of statements that are coming from the Trump administration right now. And does that put India in a difficult position? He's saying that Prime Minister Modi is not happy with me. He's not that happy because of the steep tariffs. He also said that India was concerned, the Prime Minister was concerned about the 5-year delay in delivery of Apache helicopters. And he's saying that India came to him, requesting him for the release of these helicopters. And now they're not buying Russian oil anymore. He's making these kind of statements about the government, about the Prime Minister. Do you think it makes it very difficult for the Indian government, for even the Indian trade negotiators to work with the US on this front? In this kind of an atmosphere, Can a trade deal happen?
Anticipating what President Trump says or what President Trump does is certainly an extremely difficult exercise, which I think even as Indian astrologers, known otherwise for their competence, can also probably not predict. The fact of the matter is, we do want the trade deal. Let our trade negotiators not be overtly concerned by what President Trump says or his officials say. That is more on whether the penalties would be removed or not, the 25% additional levy would go or not. If it goes, then we are well off with the new rates of duty, which we all expect under the trade deal to be much lower than the existing 25%. But in any case, that even the 25%, if it is kept, it is better than the double which we are paying. And we need to be worried about also the fact that losing the markets of the US is a matter of concern for us, because once they switch to some other supply chain gets altered, it will be difficult for us to intervene there, get in and get the US market back. So I'm really concerned.
Right. Mr. Dua,
Yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Dua, you're rightly saying that we are very concerned. In fact, almost all diplomats have said that, and even the likes of Mr. Surjit Bhalla have gone on to say that we definitely need an India-US trade deal if we want to become a Viksit Bharat by 2047. That is integral to India's growth story. Having said that, do you think the kind of comments that President Trump is making, does this mean that the US is now putting more items on the table for India to include even after the negotiation was closed? In fact, let's not forget, Jamieson Greer last year, several weeks ago, had said before the US lawmakers that India has given them the best ever proposal that the US has ever got from a country.
You know, what you're saying, Parikshit, is absolutely right. But Mr. James Green isn't the final authority, as we know, in the US. In the current milieu, in President Trump's second term, everything gets called out by him. He can turn down all the months of negotiations, the results, anything his officials say, and his stance seems to have become a little more firmer after what he's been able to achieve in the Latin America in his kind of actions in Venezuela.
Correct.
So these comments which came from him about Russia, Indian oil, somebody saying it should be 50% levy, etc., where, if you would recall, the timing was coinciding with his success, inverted commas, in Venezuela.
Absolutely. And that's what he is using, that muscular diplomacy and trade strategy to send that word. We'll take a short break at this point, but we'll request all our guests to stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News Centre. Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce, Deep Pal, Director, Geopolitics and Policy, Koan Advisory Group, and Ajay Sahai, Director General and CEO, Federation of Indian Exporters, are still with us. Mr. Sahai, what constructive or clever diplomacy do we now need to do with the United States? What has been your recommendation? What concessions should we give to quickly clinch a trade deal?
I think we have already given whatever concession India could have given, and it's a call which they have to take from the negotiator side. I think they have given a very good offer to the US to work on. But now we are not waiting for that to happen. We have already started our work, and in many of the sectors, companies are looking into the alternative market. In some of the sectors, for example, in marine sector, we have already compensated the loss which has happened into the US with a new market in Europe, Russia, and China, and probably, as told by the previous speaker, we are looking at the diversification, de-risking. I think that's the positive fallout of the tariff war, that Indian companies are now looking into the new market and probably forming up in those markets, moving away from the US. But at the same time, we do agree that US is a very good market, probably a market which provides for the volumes, and therefore, at any given point of time, once the BTA happens, they will be very keen to work in the market. The only challenge is that once you lose the buyer, how you will be getting the buyer back is an issue for the Indian exporter. That's why still we are hoping that if something happens by the 31st of January, whatever little losses Indian companies have undertaken in the hope that BTA will be in place, probably that will work to the advantage of India.
Right. Also, Mr. Sahai, what do you think we will possibly see, and are there these developments already happening? Are some of the Indian companies, in order to continue catering to US clients, are they considering or have they started moving some parts of manufacturing to other jurisdictions in Southeast Asia?
But definitely in some of the sector, they are doing part manufacturing in India, part manufacturing they are doing in other countries where they're meeting the rules of origin and getting their product in the US market at lesser duty. Is not circumvention. Probably they are doing the adequate manufacturing in those geographies so that they can retain the buyer. So whatever is possible within the rules, Indian companies are doing it. Some of them are also looking into the first sale rule, where they are moving the goods to the first seller at a price, and then from the first seller, they are sending it to the US market, getting the duty advantage, which is right now imposed on the first seller rule. So whatever is possible within the rules of the game, definitely Indian companies will be doing it, because they would like to retain the US market to the extent possible.
Right. Deep, do you believe that India must now possibly stop giving concessions, more concessions to the US, do not comment about US policy in any way, but start locking in our gains? Because whatever we are giving to the United States in terms of concessions, we've done literally everything that they wanted us to, but it's still outside the trade deal. Do you feel that any further concessions or policy changes must be contingent on some trade deal actually being reached?
Right. So, Parikshit, if I can connect that to an earlier question that you were asking about, the kind of comments that President Trump seems to be making about India, and whether that affects the trade deal negotiations. Now, there's something that we need to understand about the people on both sides of the table, both the people at the USTR's office as well as the people on the Indian side of the negotiating table from the Ministry of Commerce. Now, these are all professional bureaucrats who have worked on issues such as these, on trade negotiations, in multiple occasions across their careers, right? So I don't think a comment from the president or from any other side of the US establishment really moves them to an extent where they are not able to negotiate, depending on what the remit that they have been given, what they have been asked to do. So that's something very crucial to understand and remember. Now, having said that, if the question that we are asking is what is it that we can do further, or why is it that retail is still not coming about, it's also important to understand that, all the comments that we hear either President Trump making or other people in the Trump administration making, it's useful to remember here that not all of them are necessarily meant for us or for India or for the Indian establishment or for Indian citizens' consumption. There is a large domestic constituency, there is a large political base that all of these people also have to keep in mind. So a lot of these comments that they make are meant for the consumption of their own supporters back home. So that's one useful part to remember. Now, as far as what else can we give or what other kind of concessions can we talk about, I think the red lines for India have been drawn very, very clearly. Now, what will take is a great deal of sitting across the table and negotiating, which has been happening, as we know, both virtually as well as through the teams traveling to the two countries, which is also an indication that both sides are still keen that they find a way out of this. Right now, how long that will take, exactly when they will manage to seal some kind of a deal is something that only they can answer. But I think what is most important in this is to keep your deadlines clear and can continue the conversation, which is what we see happening right now.
All right. Mr. Dua, what do you think is the best way forward for exporters, Indian trade negotiators? Should we now just bide our time?
Not really. I think we would need to prepare for the eventuality that the trade deal gets delayed beyond January. There has
And
been...
may not happen also?
One doesn't rule it out. If President Trump is under pressure, whether it's a constituency pressure because he has the midterm elections later in the year and the Midwest, which supported him, is really the agricultural belt of the US, and he wants to do something for them. China has been obstinate in that matter. It's now agreed to a certain quota, but that's not good enough of soya being imported by them. He wants India to also open up. So there are a host of considerations which could work either way. Saying Mr. Trump says no, unless the red lines of yours, which are your red lines, are kind of withdrawn or diluted, I'm not going to be approving the deal, irrespective of what has been negotiated or what comes up to his table. Similarly, what India could perhaps, I'm just going back to the question which you asked the earlier speaker, Deep. IPR is one issue which the USA has been worried about for a long time, over 20 years, ever since we came in with the new act in 2004. Earlier it was the provisions which we thought are meant to check evergreening of basically pharmaceuticals in the US. But the US widens it to say that even if for a moment we accept your argument that your IPR law is in line with the WTO provisions, something which doesn't bother US actually, what WTO says any longer. But they've been saying its enforcement is extremely poor in India. And that whether certainly patents, but they also have been giving examples of trademarks as well as copyrights, which they say Indian people are prone to copy, many Indians, and that India just doesn't have a proficient machinery. You still ask a policeman to go and register a case or go and detect a violation under the IPR. There is no other machinery on the ground till the matter comes up to a much higher level. So that is something which we might like to look at and concede. In addition, I think it may not be something devastating if we were to allow a certain degree of soya to come into India, but only for use as ethanol. Yes, the Indian farmer will get hurt to some extent, but ethanol, the proportion of ethanol in our Indian petrol can increase tremendously. Now, it can go up from the existing about 10 to 11% to 20 to 25%. The technology in Brazil has been showing that for a long time, way ahead of others. And that it would probably serve one of the constituencies or one of the things which have been bothering Mr. Trump about doing something for the US.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Dua, for joining us with those very important remarks on what could be more concessions that we could we give the United States. Deep Pal from the Koan Advisory Group and Ajay Sahai of FIO for joining us with their very important views after Donald Trump's remarks last evening. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of News Center. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.